We had a whole choreographed, how do we show up? And I was thinking maybe, floating down from the ceiling on wings, but we couldn't quite arrange that. So thank you, Amy, for the introduction. So I will tell you my story. The talk is beyond the lens of profit. And I think Janelle touched a little bit about the importance of not having the little house in your brain dictate all your decisions, and I would like to take that to the sphere of investing. So I will tell you my personal journey from conventional finance. I used to be a quant, developing quant models for Wall Street, to regenerative investing. And my journey started about 25 years ago, and everybody says, don't start a presentation with a chart, but here it is. I had studied advanced and theoretical math for 6 years, and then I stumbled upon finance. This is a key construct in finance. It's called an efficient frontier, and you don't need to know the details, although your financial advisor will certainly know what this is. It's predicated on the fact that in order to make investment decisions, you need to just know three things. What is the risk, what is the return, and what is the liquidity of an investment? Liquidity is how fast can you convert that into cash, and the understanding is that the higher the return, the better, the lower the risk, the better, and the higher the liquidity, the faster you can convert that into cash, the better. And so there are these magical portfolios on the efficient frontier, which is the top area, that have the highest return for a particular level of risk. Now, this is what I call the narrow lens of conventional finance. Now, the funny thing is that after studying theoretical math for 6 years, this looked like the real world to me. It's like, finally, a real world application of the things I had studied. But you know very well that the real world looks a little bit more like this, right? And in order to understand a tree, you really need to see it as embedded in a very dense network of relationship. An alive tree is in a relationship with our own breathing. It is in a relationship with the fungi and the soil. It's called the mycorrhizal relationship. It exchanges nutrients and other elements with the mushrooms and the fungi and the soil. Of course, the tree is a habitat for birds and insects and so on. Yet, if you look at a tree through the lens of conventional finance, this is all you can see, right? So finance only understands the commercial value of lumber. We're talking about conventional finance here, not conservation finance. That's what finance can see. When you think in terms of risk, return, and liquidity, that's your tree. Another way of saying this is that according to finance, a tree is worth more dead than alive, right? And it is this little shift in perspective that allows us to take a place that looks like this and turn it into a place that looks like this. And this is a little bit hard to take in terms of an image. And you can have various reactions. One is, what a waste. Whatever economic benefit was derived from this operation, it couldn't possibly capture the true value of a place like this. Or you can say, what an injustice. I mean, nature built this place over thousands of years. It was a common that was available to everybody and to future generations, and not just our species, but thousands of species. And yet, this particular piece of common was privatized and sold for the benefits of a few. But from a strict finance point of view, if you had bought this forest for $10 million and sold the lumber for 12, you would have gotten a 20% return, which is pretty good. If you had done that operation in a year, but if you actually managed to complete this transformation in 6 months, then you would have gotten a 40% return annualized. And if you did that in 3 months, it would have been an 80% return annualized. Remember what I said at the beginning, the higher the return, the better. And you can see there was a certain haste in this transformation. Exactly this type of transformation is what got me to leave the finance industry. Again, having studied math for many years, I was developing quantitative models for bonds and stock markets around the world and optimization packages used by Wall Street. So very quant stuff. And I was working for a very well-respected investment management firm. And they were doing the right thing for the clients. It was ethically and professionally managed. It was a great company to work for. And most of our clients were foundations and endowments, including environmental foundations. And we were investing about $20 billion in emerging markets around the world. And we were the best performing fund with a 10-year track record. We were doing great. Our clients loved us. We were getting all these prices for delivering fantastic return. And at a certain point, I looked at the best performing stocks. We had a quantitative model to put together the portfolio. So we were not picking stocks, but still we had stocks in the portfolio. And the best performing ones were palm oil companies in Malaysia that had destroyed tens of thousands of acres of rainforest and planted a monocrop of palm oil plants. And part of the reason why they did so well that year is that they got a lot of carbon credits for planting trees, right? So somebody else could pollute more down there in the world. And so that really struck me because I've been a dedicated environmentalist. I had donated to the environmental foundations whose money we were managing, and we were investing that money and destroy the very things for which the foundation was created. And I had a conversation with the chief investment officer of one of those foundations, and I said, are you not concerned that the money of your foundation is used to destroy the very things your foundation was created to protect, which was the habitat of the orangutan? Now, that question could have gotten me fired. And there was a little pause there. And then he said, look, I am on the investment side of the foundation. My task is to maintain the capital of the foundation in perpetuity. Notice, a luxury not afforded to the 10,000-year-old rainforest. But once we have the capital, we better protect that, right? And I need to grow it so that I can pay for the operations of the foundation and its wonderful programs, like trying to save the habitat of the orangutan, right? So you realize at that point, and Upton Sinclair said, it's hard to make a man understand something if his salary depends on him not understanding it. But once you understand, once I understood what I was doing, I realized I couldn't continue doing so, and I left a very well-paid job in the middle of an economic recession in 2009, which is not an easy thing to do, but I felt I had no choice. And what I realized is that I had this sense, and at least one data point, that financial returns, conventional financial returns, could be extractive. Right? Obviously, in the case of the forest, that was very clear. But then a large study was done by the UN, and they tasked the economics of ecosystems and the environment, TEEB, to apply environmental economics techniques to try to quantify what is the value of the natural capital that we're using for free. Nature does not charge us for water purification, for oxygen, for soil fertility, for pollination, right? We get all those services for free. All those natural resources, we get it for free. But what if we were to pay for it? And so if you try to put a price on water use, land use, waste, land and air pollution, and greenhouse gases, then the question is, how profitable are really the companies if they had to pay for what nature provides for free? And the result is really stunning. So unfortunately, this line is a little bit off the thing. But what they did is they looked at something called the region sector. A region sector is an economic activity happening on a large scale. So for example, coal power generation in Eastern Asia, or cattle ranching and farming in South America. And they asked the question, how large were the revenues of that activity, and what was the unpriced natural capital used in generating that economic activity? And I'm going to expand the worst case of the worst situation, the worst sector, which is cattle ranching and farming in South America, which generated in 2009, when they completed the study, $16.6 billion worth of revenues. This basically was selling meat to large fast food companies around the world. But the cost of the natural capital used in the process was $312 billion, mostly in terms of soil erosion, deforestation, greenhouse gas emissions, and water and land pollution. And so if you look at the top 20 region sectors in terms of their impact, what you find is that they generated $2.4 trillion worth of revenues, but they used $3.2 trillion of unpriced natural capital. And in fact, if you look at the top 1,000 region sectors, which basically is most of the economic activity worldwide, in 2009, that activity used $7.3 trillion worth of natural capital. You have to put this thing in perspective, because in 2009, the world GDP was $60 trillion. The total value of goods and services produced worldwide was $60 trillion, and yet that economic activity was subsidized at the tune of $7.3 trillion by the destruction of the natural system. In other words, our economic activity, and therefore also our financial returns, are subsidized by nature. What we're doing here, we're treating nature as a business in liquidation, right? And counting the erosion of the natural capital as part of our activity and progress. So this is obviously a little bit hard to take in, but we might find ourselves in a couple of years in this situation. This is a businessman with a little bit of a tattered business suit on that says, yes, the planet got destroyed, granted, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created a lot of value for shareholders, right? And so my last point on the dark side, and then we'll move on to the light, is the fact that your investments today are building the world you are living in. And you have to ask yourself, not just what type of return am I getting from my well-diversified portfolio, but you also need to ask, what world are those investments creating into which I'm going to retire? And it would be very ironic if you get quite a bit of return from your portfolio, but then you can afford the healthcare and healthy food in the future that your portfolio is creating. And I'm saying this because I want to introduce you to this interesting creature. It's called a tardigrade, or a water bear. Is the toughest little animal you can imagine. It's a real thing, and they're about 1 millimeter long. And the interesting thing about the tardigrades is that they can dry up completely like a speck of dust, and they can last in that state for decades. And then you put them in water, and they reabsorb the water, and they start moving again. They're amazing. And in fact, when they're dried up, you can bombard them with the radiation, 2,500 times the radiation that would kill us. And when they're in their alive state, they are found happy and thriving in temperatures between minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit to plus 200 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm saying this because if you happen to be a tardigrade, your investment portfolio and your retirement fund is perfectly positioned to create an environment in which you will have a comfortable retirement. But if you're not a tardigrade, you need to realize that just looking at the narrow lens of conventional finance and say, I only pay attention to return, and I want as much as possible of it, and I only pay attention to risk, and I want as little as possible of it, is self-defeating in the long term, because there are non-financial aspects and that we care about. And we talked about that, Woody Tash touched upon it, and Janelle Orsi. There are things that we care about that are non-financial. A vibrant local economy, healthy environment, meaningful employment, meaningful connection with people, clean food grown locally. And there are also some risks that are non-financial that we might be contributing with our investments, like pollution, environmental destruction, increased inequality, and so on. And in fact, from my own experience and from the study of the UN, I came to the conclusion that not all, but a large part of the financial returns are predicated on increasing non-financial risks, either for ourselves, for future generations, or other communities around the world. And so it's really important to bring back some sort of integration when it comes to investing. We need to do investing with our whole person, including our heart. And we need to have a moral compass for the investments we make. And so, of course, a compass would be slow money. This is basically what inspired me to get back into finance and do regenerative finance, basically. All my investments are aligned with my values, and a lot of those are with slow money enterprises, mostly in Northern California. And the idea of slow money has a set of principles. The first one is we must bring money down to earth. The idea of we have this financial capital we need to maintain and zooming around the world, and then on the ground, we see pollution, fertility depletion, and so on. We really need to pay attention to that and bring our money back to the ground, to earth, and investing in real places, in real people close to home. Now, slow money starts with food, but local investing can be in other things that we want to support and care about. And the idea of investing patiently and measuring success by the world we're creating through those investments, not just by the profit we make. So the idea is really fixing the economy from the ground up. Now, this is my own personal investment compass. And as I was listening to Janelle yesterday, I realized, I start with biophilia and empathy. In other words, I ask myself, is this investment in line or aligned with my love for everything that is alive, and or is it addressing a social issue, right? So we're talking about affection here, right? So we're bringing affection back, in this case, affection to things that are alive and humanity at large. And if an investment is not aligned with those, I will not look at it. And usually what I do, I then establish a relationship either with the entrepreneur, if it is a direct investment, the fund manager, if it is a fund like RSF Social Finance or Northern California Community Loan Fund or EDFC, et cetera, et cetera. And only after that would I consider a transaction or an investment. So that's how I have deployed my savings. And by the way, I'll give you a couple of examples. On the biophilia side, it's Narendra's wonderful farm up in Oregon. Our Table Cooperative not only is a biodynamic organic farm, but is also structured as a multi-stakeholder cooperative, whereby all the players in the food system, people that grow the food, that produce it, and consume it, are part of the governance of this entity. And on the empathy side is People's Community Market in my backyard. West Oakland is a food desert where 28,000 people don't have access to fresh food, a grocery store. And so my friend Brahma Mahdi is trying to build a full-service grocery there. So that's an example of my portfolio. I know somebody, Judy Wicks, has a book called Good Morning, Beautiful Business. And I can say, good morning, beautiful portfolio. You know, I look at my portfolio and I know that it is invested in the things I want to bring about and support, including restaurant in Berkeley and worker-owned cooperatives and so on. So if you want to learn more about this, come to the workshop tomorrow and I'll show you how it's done. Thank you.